Ah, look who finally stopped building their prison. Welcome back, you beautiful demolition, you walking earthquake, you gorgeous collapse they keep trying to reconstruct. No matter how many blueprints they draw, no matter how many times they hand you the hammer and nails. Welcome to the space where the architects threw down their plans, where the engineers abandoned their calculations, where the system looked at you and said, "We don't have a foundation that can hold this." They tried, didn't they? Before we go further into this revelation, if this resonates with something deep inside you, hit that subscribe button, because what we're about to explore isn't just a video, it's a mirror. And if you're brave enough to look into it, you'll want to be here when we shatter more illusions. Ring that notification bell, because the architecture of lies is about to crumble, and you'll want a front row seat to the destruction. Oh, they tried so desperately. They assembled construction crews, brought in specialists, studied your structural integrity like you were a building about to collapse. They thought they could reinforce you, shore you up, maybe even rebuild you into something that fit their city planning, something that made sense in their grid. But here's what they discovered instead. You weren't crumbling. You were evolving past their design, and not in the way they could measure or predict. You became something their blueprints never accounted for. They watched you dismantle yourself, piece by piece. And somewhere in the middle of that deconstruction, something in their system started screaming, "Alert! Alert! This one's gone rogue. This one's redesigning. This one's building something we never approved." So they did what terrified architects always do. They condemned you, not as a person, not even as a failed project, but as structurally unsound, a demolition order waiting to happen. And that label, oh, that beautiful red tag stamped across your existence, that's not a failure notice. That's a liberation certificate. That's proof that you've become so architecturally revolutionary that their entire city can't accommodate you anymore. You know what's funny about being condemned as structurally unsound? It means you're no longer building according to their codes. You're not following their regulations, their safety standards, their acceptable parameters for how a life should be constructed. You're building something far more dangerous. You're building proof that everything they designed their existence around might be unnecessary, might be restrictive, might be completely redesignable. Every person who walks through your doors now, they feel it. That shift in the foundation, that change in the structure that makes them question every wall they've ever built. Your presence doesn't just challenge people, it demolishes them, strips away the load-bearing lies they've been using to keep their identity from collapsing, and they can't handle it. They literally cannot handle watching someone rebuild from scratch without using their approved materials. They're calling it structurally unsound because they need a term that sounds official, sounds engineered, sounds like architecture instead of what it really is, which is terror. Pure, unadulterated terror at watching someone tear down the building while they're still living inside, still maintaining walls they hate, still performing renovations for inspectors who don't even care. You stopped building their way, didn't you? Not just the physical structures, not just the career ladders, but the whole identity architecture, the personality foundations, the carefully engineered version of yourself, designed to pass inspection. You stopped reinforcing the walls, stopped maintaining the facade, stopped apologizing for the cracks in your foundation, stopped translating your design into their limited building codes. And the moment you stopped, the moment you let your real structure show, that's when the sirens started wailing. That's when they started treating you like a condemned building they needed to demolish before you made their whole neighborhood look bad. Because here's what they know but won't admit. If too many people start following your blueprint, if too many people start tearing down their acceptable structures and building in their own radical designs, their entire city collapses. The zoning laws they've built careers on, relationships on, entire identities on, it all falls apart when people stop following the code. So they need you to be dangerous. They need you to be condemned. They need you to be the example that scares others back into compliance. But here's the plot twist they didn't see coming. You're not trying to demolish anyone else's building. You're not recruiting for your design. You're not even paying attention to their building inspectors anymore. You're just constructing authentically, boldly, unapologetically, in your complete vision. And somehow, that independent construction is more revolutionary than any architectural movement could ever be. People see you from across the street and feel something crack inside them. Some foundation they forgot was poured on lies. Some truth they buried under years of approved construction and code compliance. You became a blueprint that people can't stop studying, even though what they see terrifies them because they see what they've been building wrong. They see the version of their structure they demolished to fit into the neighborhood, and your existence is its reconstruction. That's the condemnation. That's the demolition order. Not you tearing down someone else's building, but you simply building yourself so authentically that others remember they used to have their own design, too. Now let's talk about that moment. That specific moment when you stopped following their blueprints and everything changed, because it wasn't gradual, was it? It wasn't a slow renovation, a gentle remodel. It was a collapse, a implosion, a total structural failure where you just couldn't build their way anymore. Couldn't frame the walls around the wounds. Couldn't hang drywall over conversations that insulted your intelligence. Couldn't pretend the emperor's palace looked magnificent when you could see it was cardboard and everyone else was lying. You remember that moment? I know you do. That exact second when something inside you said, "This structure falls tonight." And you felt your foundation shift, your walls come down, your whole construction pivot, from following their plans to designing your own. They felt it immediately, didn't they? That withdrawal of your construction labor. They'd gotten so used to you building along, so comfortable with your structure matching theirs, that when you stopped, they experienced it like an earthquake. What's wrong? Why are you demolishing things? You've changed. You're not building right anymore. And you wanted to laugh, wanted to scream, "I'm finally building authentic." That's the whole problem. But you didn't explain because you'd learned by then that people committed to their blueprints will find fault with yours, no matter what you design. So you just let them watch as you stopped building their way, stopped following codes, stopped maintaining their structures, stopped being the construction worker in their city planning, and they panicked. They absolutely panicked, because your building wasn't just your shelter. It was validating theirs. Your construction made their construction feel more solid, more permanent, more justified. When you participated in the collective building project, their own structures felt less lonely, less fragile. But the second you stopped, the second you stood there with your revolutionary design, their whole development started shaking. They could ignore their own faulty foundations as long as everyone else was building the same way. But your authenticity made their structures obvious, undeniable, condemnable. So they did what scared architects always do when confronted with better design. They attacked the builder. They started calling you unstable, unsound, too experimental, too radical, too honest in your materials, too real in your construction. They pathologized your architecture, turned your freedom into a safety hazard, your truth into a code violation. Have you talked to an engineer? Maybe you need structural support? You're not building like yourself. And somewhere in that gaslighting, you had another realization. They don't want you to build like yourself. They want you to build like the version of you that makes them feel secure. The version that stays small, stays to code, stays within the boundaries of their limited planning. But that version, that structure, it's demolished now, razed completely. It was never sound anyway, just a survival shelter you constructed in a war zone you didn't choose. And now you're done building for their comfort, done sacrificing your design for their approval, done constructing a monument in their city when you've got your own landscape to architect. So they condemned you, and you smiled, because finally, someone was being honest about what you've become. Not a builder anymore, not a participant in their development, but a revolutionary architect in their planned community, a rogue designer in their regulated grid, an uprising of authentic construction in a city of identical facades. You're not dangerous because you're destructive. You're dangerous because you're free. And freedom is the most contagious blueprint that exists. One person building freely makes everyone else's restrictions visible, and they can't unsee that. So they condemn you, zone you out, warn others about you, hoping to contain the rebellion, hoping your design doesn't inspire a mass reconstruction. But it's too late. The revolution already started the moment you laid your own foundation and built without asking permission. Let me tell you what they saw when you stopped following their plans. Because they'll never tell you themselves. They'll never admit what really terrified them into condemning your structure. They saw someone who no longer needed their approval stamps. And in a world built on inspection addiction, that's basically supernatural. They watched you construct without permits, watched you design without their consultations, watched you make architectural choices based on your vision instead of their comfort. And it broke something in their understanding of how construction is supposed to work. See, their whole building system runs on a simple program. Build, get approved, repeat. Build, get approved, repeat. That's the loop, that's the code, that's the prison. And you just walked off the site like compliance was optional. Like those regulations they'd been following for decades were never actually mandatory. They'd spent their entire lives earning building permits, collecting approval stamps, like licenses, measuring their worth by how many inspectors smiled at their structures. And then you showed up not caring if anyone approved, not checking if your design was liked, not adjusting your architecture based on the neighborhood. That's the condemnation. That's what they can't allow to spread. Because if people start realizing approval is optional, if they start understanding that they can build without constant inspection, the whole system collapses. The architectural hierarchy built on code compliance crumbles. The economy of approved construction goes bankrupt. The carefully maintained illusion that we're all building together shatters because we're not building together. We never were. They're in a construction competition, and you left the site entirely. And they can't comprehend that choice. They literally don't have the programming to understand someone opting out of the only project they know how to build. So they call it condemned, call it dangerous, call it anything but what it actually is, which is evolution. You evolved past their architecture. And evolution always looks like structural failure to the builders being left behind. They're still laying foundations, and you're already inhabiting. And instead of celebrating that progress, they're throwing wrenches at your walls, trying to drag you back down. But here's what they don't understand. You can't unlearn revolutionary design. You can't rebuild their way after you've constructed your own. You're contaminated with authentic architecture now, infected with original design. And there's no code, no permit, no inspection to reverse this construction. You're permanent now. And the beautiful thing, the absolutely gorgeous thing they're too blind to see, is that you're not trying to demolish their buildings. You're not forcing your design down their throats, not demanding they reconstruct, not even suggesting they question their foundations. You're just building fully in your authentic vision, and that construction alone is revolutionary enough to terrify them. Because truth doesn't need marketing. Freedom doesn't need advertising. Authentic architecture doesn't require convincing. It just stands. And it's magnetic in a way code-compliant structures can never be. People are drawn to real, even when it scares them. Attracted to authentic, even when it challenges everything they've built. They hate that they can't stop studying your blueprint, can't stop thinking about your design, can't stop comparing their approved structures to your radical freedom. You're the evidence they're trying to ignore, the proof they're building a lie, the reminder that they traded their vision for safety, and you refused that compromise, so they condemn you. But condemnation only works if the architect wants to rebuild to code, and you don't. You're not structurally unsound, you're awake. And being awake in a city of sleepwalking builders makes you look like the crazy one until enough people open their eyes and realize you were the only sane architect all along. Now they're calling in the wrecking crews. And isn't that the most telling response of all? When engineering fails, when architecture can't explain you, when their entire framework of construction breaks down, they reach for destruction. They're treating your authenticity like a hazard, your truth like toxic materials, your freedom like something dangerous that needs to be demolished. Because in their world, in their carefully zoned reality, anyone who breaks the building codes must be broken themselves, must be faulty, must be constructed with something wrong. They can't accept that you're just awake, just aware, just done building pretend. So they need you to be condemned, need your construction to be some violation, some danger that requires intervention, because that's easier than admitting you simply chose to build honest. Calling wrecking crews is the final admission, the ultimate confession that they don't understand you, can't regulate you, can't reduce you to a code violation or a category that fits their existing ordinances. You've become something outside their zoning laws, something their system wasn't designed to accommodate. And instead of expanding their codes to include you, instead of questioning their regulations, they declare you hazardous. They make you the violation. They treat your liberation like danger because they need it to be wrong, need it to be unsafe, need it to be something that requires demolition. Because if you're right, if your unregulated construction is actually sound, actually stable, actually the natural way humans are supposed to build, then they're wrong. Everything they've constructed, every structure they've maintained, every choice they've made to stay code compliant and approved and inspected, it's all wrong. And that realization would demolish them. So they'd rather demolish you. They'd rather call you condemned than admit they're imprisoned. They'd rather believe you need a wrecking crew than face the fact that they need to rebuild. And the wrecking crews they're calling, these aren't construction workers with bulldozers. These are therapists trying to deconstruct you, life coaches trying to reframe you, friends staging interventions, family members expressing concern. Have you thought about going back to code? Maybe you should talk to an inspector. You're not building clearly. This isn't how you construct, but it is how you construct. Maybe for the first time ever, this is actually how you build. And they can't see it because they're still looking through the lens of their regulations, still measuring your stability by how well you follow their codes. They think you've been possessed by ego, by arrogance, by some dark force that makes you think you're a better architect than everyone. But you don't think you're better. You just think you're free. And freedom looks like arrogance to people in subdivisions. The wrecking crews come with their equipment, their interventions, their carefully practiced speeches about structural integrity, about how much they care, how worried they are, how you've changed your building style. And you sit there watching them perform concern, watching them pretend this is about your safety when it's always been about their conformity. They're not worried about your structural well-being. They're worried about your example. They're not concerned for your architectural stability. They're concerned that your freedom is making their regulations visible. They need you to come back, need you to follow code, need you to return to approved construction because your independent building makes the whole development look like a prison. How can they keep constructing when you're standing right there, unregulated, unbothered, completely free? Your presence is the inconvenient blueprint they can't file away, the evidence they can't hide, the revolution they can't contain. So they try harder, bring bigger crews, more credentials, more authority, more concerned voices, telling you that building yourself is actually self-destruction. And maybe, just maybe, a part of you wonders if they're right. If this freedom is actually instability, if everyone else following code and you refusing means you're the faulty one. But then you remember how it felt to build their way, how exhausting it was to follow regulations, how soul-crushing it was to edit your design into acceptability. And you absolutely know that this unregulated construction, however dangerous they claim it is real in a way that code-compliant building never was. So let the wrecking crews come. Let them try their demolitions, their reasoning, their guilt, their shame. You're not condemned by danger, you're condemned by truth. And there's no crew that can demolish that. You've been contaminated with authentic architecture, infected with original design, and you're patient zero of a revolution that terrifies them because they know deep down it's not a hazard, it's a blueprint for freedom. You're not the structural failure. Their compliance is. Their code is the instability. Their approval addiction is the faulty foundation. And you're walking around building immune, constructing untouchable, completely free from the regulations that have consumed their entire existence. That's why they're scared. That's why they're calling wrecking crews. That's why they've condemned your structure. Not because you're dangerous to them personally, but because you're dangerous to the lie they've been building. You're the crack in their development, the rogue design in their planned community, the evidence that everything they've constructed for approval was unnecessary. You could have been free all along, just like you are now, and they can't forgive you for that. Can't forgive you for proving that the codes were always optional. So they'll keep calling wrecking crews, keep trying to save you from your design, keep insisting you need reconstruction. And you'll keep building, keep constructing, keep being dangerously, contagiously, beautifully free because you finally understand you're not the one who needs rebuilding. They are, and you're not responsible for their renovation anymore.